Hi guys, this is Sourdough Kathy, and in my first couple of videos on worms, I told you that one of the things that I believed that your worms need are proper bedding if you want them or expect them to stay in the bin that you put them in. Now, the two worms that I'm talking about mainly, and this may stand true for blues also, but lots of people have trouble keeping their European night crawlers and their African night crawlers inside the bin. So for about a year now, I've had European night crawlers, and a little less than a year I've had Africans. And the first bins that I put them in, I put the normal stuff in. There was a few little bit of leaves, and there was lots of cardboard and a little bit of grounds of coir, because I don't like coir with the long hairs in it, so I usually remove the long hairs. But what I found was when I got done and it was time to harvest, there were big chunks of cardboard throughout the whole thing. It's a pain in the neck picking them out, making sure you don't toss out your wisps with them, and your wisps of course are your infant worms. So I decided worms come from the outside. They're used to this. They are used to leaves. So I decided that what happened was I had a bin similar to this, and I had put leaves in it for some reason. I don't even know why I did it, but I found that when I opened it up, they were very much broken down in there, so kind of like leaf mulch, and so, or leaf mold, or whatever the heck they call it. So I decided I was going to bring it in and see how my worms did. And I started a test where I would take the worms, I would turn them over every day. I would actually was trying to annoy them to see if anything I could do would get them to try and leave the bin, and it never did. So what I'm going to do is show you what I do now. Right now this is pretty wet, a lot wet, too wet actually. But the reason I did that was because I put boiling water in it to make sure that if there were any slugs in it, they were not going to come in my house and mess up my compost. So I have something that's going to take care of that. And one of the things that I have been putting into these bins with my leaves, this actually smells a little anaerobic right now. It's stinky, actually, horse manure kind of smell, and that'll go away in a little bit as soon as I get some other stuff in it. But I was getting coffee chaff from my local roaster, and this is coffee chaff. I'm going to pour some in here. And this is all I have left because their machines broke down somewhere along the line, and they had to stop giving it to me. I don't know what they're doing to brew their coffee or to roast their coffee, but this is it. Now this is a brown, and let me say something here. We're not making a hot compost, so it doesn't matter about browns and greens here. We're talking about bedding for your worms. So this is what I do. I'm going to put in this coffee chaff, and I'm going to mix it up really good. And that'll help soak up a whole bunch of that water that's down in the bottom. And while I'm at it, I'm going to add a little bit of alfalfa meal, which I have for my garden and to help my hot compost pile, because I also do hot composting. So I'm going to add a little of that, and that'll work as food also. That will also soak up a bunch of that water in there. Now, I've been doing this for a good, excuse me for sniffling, but this stuff is getting up my nose. A good probably 6 to 8 months now with if not longer than that, because I think I only did one try with the original cardboard and whatnot, and then just kept putting the cardboard into the next bin. It took like 3 or 4 tries before the cardboard actually finally disappeared, which was ridiculous to me. So on top of that, poofy, lots of water down here, unfortunately. Of course, the worms won't care. They actually, I have found that my African night crawlers and my European night crawlers have gotten a lot larger since I've been keeping them in a wetter bin. Now, that makes it a little bit harder when it comes to getting your castings, and you'll have to wait a little while for them to dry out. But you know what? In the long run, I think it's worth it, because you get a much bigger worm. Your worms, if they're bigger, they eat more, consume more, and make more good castings. Now, I haven't showed you a picture of my garden lately because it's not a garden yet. It's still my starts. But I have managed to get them outdoors, and I will pop something up real soon so that you can see what has happened. I'll let it be a surprise. Now, the other thing that I use, and no one has to use this. You don't have to use the coffee chaff. You can just use grass or moss or anything that's dried up, and then your leaves. But you want to break your leaves down a little by using a lawnmower or a weed whacker in a barrel or something. But here in Alaska, I have a great resource, and what I do is, this is moose poop. And I take the little nuggets and I run it through a screen, and this is what I get. And I usually throw some coffee in there with it to help break it down. This one probably has some food juices in it, and that will help some of this. And I'll tell you what, recently my worms, my African night crawlers, just went through a bin at about this height, about the same height this is right now. In 3 months' time, they have provided the most amount of castings that I've probably ever gotten. So I'm going to keep doing this. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, I do have a little bit of juice from some old pumpkin that from last winter that I got from people getting rid of their. And what I do is I take this and I pour this old juice in there, because that's very enticing. Especially, it'll get the microbes going. You don't have to add anything to it. You don't have to add anything. And what I will do, I don't have it with me right now, I'm going to add a little bit of eggshell. I do not put a lot of eggshell or any kind of buffer, as everybody seems to call it, in here. And I'll tell you the reason why. I read an article, and the article said that most worms live in soil or in the leaves, which runs between 5.5 and 6.5 pH. Now, when you're you're just dumping in pH and pH and pH, you're actually knocking off the pH of your bins. There's nothing wrong with doing it if you're using, a lot of stuff like oranges or lemons, which you really shouldn't. Everything should be in moderation. You shouldn't be using a lot of that stuff at one time, but it's been proven that we can feed them tomatoes, we can feed them onions, we can feed them hot peppers. There's all kinds of stuff that you can really get away with feeding them. It's just that you want to do everything in moderation. So this is it. If you want to keep your worms, your African night crawlers, and your European night crawlers in the bins, I would suggest to you that you try something similar to this. Like I said, you're not going to have moose droppings unless you live in Alaska or Canada, someplace like that. But you know what? Rabbit poop is great. They love rabbit poop. So if you can get your hands on rabbit poop, just kind of rinse it off a little bit. I do. I have some, I don't have rabbits, but we've got a few running around the house here outside. And I just go outside and pick it up. And I throw it in some water, make it into a slurry, and pour it in top. And boy, I'm telling you, those worms will go after that stuff in a heartbeat. So one reason they might have a little problem, because I put some nitrogen in here, which is the alfalfa meal. Now, when I did this once before, I did it without thinking, and I just threw my African night crawlers into it. Thank God they like heat. But there is a possibility, because you're putting carbons with nitrogens, which is your alfalfa and your leaves, that it could heat up. And mine actually heated up to like 110 degrees. So I'm going to wait a day or two, maybe 3 at the very most. Under most circumstances, I wouldn't do it. If I hadn't put the alfalfa in, I would not do that. But because I put the alfalfa in, I'm going to wait, see if it heats up. And if it doesn't, then I'm just going to throw some worms that need to get into some new bedding here right into it. It doesn't matter. This will probably be really good to go by tomorrow or the next day at the most. And for Africans, it wouldn't make any difference, but I'm actually putting Europeans that need a new bed right now. They're going through their bedding like nobody's tomorrow. I've got thousands of them in one bin. I've got like 4,000 in one, probably another couple grand in another one. So they need to get out and get some new bedding. And that's about it for now. Now, if your leaves hadn't been wet, you want to wet them. Get them wet so that they start to break down. And that's about it. I think I've got everything in there. I hope this will be informative for you. If you want to try African night crawlers or Europeans and you don't want them running around, and I don't put lids on my bins. I don't have holes in the bottom, and I don't have lids. So considering the fact that I'm obsessive compulsive and mess with them every day and turn them over and do all kinds of stuff, and for them not to want to leave, I feel like I found the primo spot for my worms. So that's all, folks. If you like what you see and you want more content, just check like, subscribe. If you don't want to subscribe, that's fine too. I thank you for joining me. Love y'all, and you take care of yourselves now. Bye-bye.